Hi, I'm Kaytlyn.
And I'm Brianna.
And welcome to the Reader's Clubhouse, where we revisit our childhood favorite content. Brianna, how's your cat feel about water?
She's kind of middle ground about it. Like, she likes to drink it and everything. But she doesn't like...
Good.
And she also runs away from it if I spray her with the spray bottle.
I would also run away if someone sprayed. Well, actually, it depends on...
See?
How hot it is outside. Actually. My roommate's cat, he will only drink water out of the sink faucet, and specifically only the bathroom sink faucet. I think because he's not allowed in the kitchen counter. Yeah. But it's very funny because if there's a bowl of water out, he'll go into the bathroom and be like, "Meow, I'm dying. Why do you dehydrate me?" And he's very dramatic.
Such a dramatic cat.
Cats are quite dramatic, actually.
Yeah. As an owner, I 100% agree.
Yeah. As someone who often watches a lot of cats, I also 100% agree with myself.
Yeah.
Speaking of cats, this book that we're reading today has a cat who is afraid of water, and that becomes her downfall.
It is her kryptonite.
It is. Oh my gosh. It is her kryptonite. That's a great way of explaining that, actually.
Thank you.
I support this. So, Brianna, why don't you go ahead and tell us about what book we're reading? Like, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so we let you guys know last week what the book we were going to be talking about this week was. And this time we are talking about Mossflower. And this is... I forgot to look at what publication order this was for this book. But this is Mossflower, and it was written in 1988. I actually feel like this was the actual second book publicized, because it's literally only 2 years after the first book came out.
Yeah.
And
there's a really easy way to figure this out. You keep
okay,
talking.
Yes. Kaytlyn was going to look up that because I was a bad researcher and forgot to write that down. But as you all know, this was written by the author Brian Jacques. It is a fantasy book, and it is generally meant for children or students or anything from the ages of 8 to 14, so like middle grade. So if this is a book that you're interested in sharing with your family or your kids, that's around the age that you probably want to be sharing it with them and everything.
Yeah. It is the second published book.
Cool. My instincts were correct. So what I'm going to do, like we did last time, and like we said previously, sometimes we're bad at keeping things short. So your thoughts about how long it takes me to get through this overview, description, etc. of the book. Give me your thoughts. Tell me what you think about it and everything.
Tell me what you think about me.
So one of the things one of the things I do want to clarify is this book is set before Redwall. In the timeline of the Redwall series, it is a prequel to it. It is not right before Redwall. This is like, as it says in the series, seasons before. So they don't really go by years or months, it's by seasons. So this is set seasons before, and all of the characters that we interact with in this book will not ever be characters we see at Redwall or any point beyond that. But they may get mentioned, possibly. So, just wanted to make sure you guys knew that before I go into the overview. So, to start, in the opening, we are introduced to many of our main players. Zarmina, the Queen of Cotir, that attempts to rule over Mossflower Woods. Martin the Warrior, who we all know somewhat from reading Redwall at this point. And Gonf, the Mouse Thief, who is a cheeky mouse that loves to steal and sing his way through life. We are also shown the issue that the Mossflower Woodlanders face. They are being crushed under the weight of the rule of Zarmina, and they want to stop it. A group of Woodlanders, led by Skipper the Otter and Lady Amber the Squirrel, attempt to fight off Zarmina's horde and everything, while their leader, Bella, the Badger Lady of Brockhall, searches for other ways to stop them. Soon, Gonf, the mouse he mentioned previously, brings a warrior to their doorstep, Martin. He pledges to help them take down Zarmina, who destroyed his father's sword and locked him away for a time. After some information about a place where Badger warriors go is revealed, Martin, Gonf, and a mole named... What's his name, Kaytlyn? How do you say it?
I lost track.
The mole.
Oh, I always called him Dingy.
Okay, I also call him Dingy, but I think it might be Dinny.
Dinny?
I think that's actually his name, yeah. But my brain also did that. So, Martin, Gonf, and Dinny, the mole, set off to find Salamandastron, the home of the Badger Lords. It is a long journey where they run into many interesting people and fight against other foes, but they eventually make their way to the mountain. They meet a small group of hares and the old badger lord named Bor the Fighter. But Bor is old and has only one last fight in him that he must use to protect the mountain itself. Bor does fix Martin's sword and gives him some teaching in becoming an even better warrior. In Bor's final conflict with a sea rat, the sea rat captain is killed and a number of slaves on his ship are set free by Martin and his friends. Sadly, Bor has died in this conflict, but they gain a number of allies to take back with them so they can take down Sarmina for good. They then commandeer the sea rat ship and make their way back to Mossflower via the waterways. Back in the woodlands, a number of conflicts between the woodlanders and the castle have occurred while our heroes are away. One plan of the woodlanders was to flood the castle with the nearby lake that it was close to. It didn't go quite as they planned, but it was still doing it slowly but surely. As all seemed to be lost, Martin and his new army arrive and help push back against Sarmina's horde, but also just as the castle begins to flood fully with the woodlanders' previous plan. Sarmina, who has gone quite mad at this point due to the slow trickling of the water in the castle coterie, tries to escape, but Martin finds her and they have a grueling fight where Martin is almost brought down. Thankfully, with the help of Avis Germain of Lomahedge, they are able to save Martin and Mossflower Woods is free once again.
Well done, Brianna.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward Redwall story.
Yeah.
Some fun things, some new places mentioned, some interesting points that are just kind of left in this book, some of which will be touched on in future books, but some
yeah.
Not for a while.
Yeah, there's some kernel of ideas that are introduced in this book, and kernel of, like, story. Yeah,
that Brian eventually will. Sometimes he will deal with, sometimes he won't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in this book, a significant increase in poetry and songs.
Yes.
Mostly because of everybody's favorite mouse thief, Gonf, or Ganoff, as Brianna likes to call him. You're welcome.
That's what my brain did.
Brianna.
Thank you.
Yeah, he is not just a little mouse thief. He is also a bard, basically. If we're doing classic kind of jobs, he's a singer. He's a storyteller, and so a lot of times he'll just sing little ditties. Something like "Pick a lock, you'll regret the day when you took a mouse thief and locked him away. Silly cat, look at that, it's 2 for 1. The thief and the warrior by dawn will be gone." I mean,
that's actually a really good one.
I mean, it is a really good one, and I just opened to that page, Brianna. That was impressive.
That's very impressive.
And yeah, so there's I think a lot less maybe big poetry in terms of like marching songs and things like that we get from other things. Or in Redwall, they had just a bunch of different people singing random songs. Gonf is the main singer for this. And in the audiobook, I believe his ditties don't have backing music most of the time, if not all the time. Just because he's just it's just making them up as he's going along, you know?
Yeah.
He's
all off the top of his head.
Bebopping through the forest, all off the top of his head. Yeah, so I think it's one of the things that I love about these books is just the very simple poetry about a bunch of random things. And especially with Gonf, I love a quirky side character, and especially a quirky side character that sings. I am 100% on board with that kind of thing. So,
I'm very aware of that.
He's good.
Yeah.
Cool. So for the world building, there's some new places mentioned. Now again, this is the second book, so second published book, but it is technically a prequel. And it is always a question I have around prequels that come out after the first thing.
Yeah.
Looking at you, Star Wars.
Oh my gosh.
That introduce new things that are not mentioned in the original book or content. And I'm like, interesting. So
very interesting.
A couple of new places, actually 4 new places I realized mentioned. So Coterie is one of them, and Coterie is the precursor to Redwall. It is in the exact location that Redwall will one day be.
Yeah.
It is buried, sort of, what's the word? Submerged under the lake. that, and you read at the end of the book that part of that lake becomes the Abbey Pond.
Yeah.
Later in Redwall's history. And so that's an interesting thing. We do actually revisit Cotir in a future book. I can't remember if it's a recent one that I've read or if it's a further one. But it is actually something that is revisited at least once. I think as I'm racking my brain, I think it might actually be twice. So interesting that it's there and it's mentioned.
Yeah.
Then we have the great, the mighty, the many, the place that will be mentioned many, many times.
It has its own book.
Books. It has its own book that is actually very good.
Yes.
Salamandastron.
Yeah.
The Badger Mountain. The Dragon Mountain, I think it's described in this book because of the fire that is spewed from the top of it, which is when Bor, the fighter, the ancient Badger Lord, who is also Bella's father, is working in the forge. Some, I guess, facts about Salamandastron. It is a mountain. It's a hollowed out volcano, specifically, I believe. And it is home to the badgers and the hares. So it's usually one badger lord or lady and then a militia or military amount of hares. Not rabbits, and it's very specific.
Yes.
They're not rabbits. They're hares. There's a difference. And I can't remember what the difference is because they're the same thing. In my head, they're the same thing, but they're not. They're not, I know. And
hares are
Basil would be disappointed in me.
More lanky. Rabbits are more round.
Oh, also, okay. That actually makes sense.
If you look at a hare, if you look like a side by side,
I don't look like a hare.
Not if you look at a picture side by side of a hare and a rabbit, a hare looks like it's seen like the other side and
combat.
Yes, and then rabbits just kind of look like I'm here kind of a thing and stuff. So those are the different vibes they give off when you see a real life one.
That is very funny. I don't think I've ever done that.
Looked at a hare side by side with a rabbit?
Yeah, with the bunny.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen it somewhere before. Now, yeah. Maybe not right now.
Right now.
Yes.
Yeah, because we're in the middle of recording a podcast. Yeah. That would be
we should do that later.
Crazy of me. I will immediately after this.
Yes.
Maybe I'll post this on Instagram and be like, guys, I was totally wrong. They're not the same thing. Brianna's totally right. This animal has seen some haunting days.
It has,
in the past. Anyway, badgers and hares, Salamandastron. And again, this will come up more and more and more, and we'll meet more and more badgers and hares and all sorts of really good people and animals that honestly become some of my favorite characters. Honestly, it is a major place, but the fact that it's not mentioned as often as it should be, in my opinion, is Loamhedge. So Loamhedge is, I guess, even more of a precursor to Redwall Abbey than Cotir is. Yeah. Cotir is the actual land where Redwall will one day be built. Yeah. Loamhedge is the spiritual ancestor of Redwall. So the Loamhedge, I believe in this book, was announced that there was a disease that ran through and killed a bunch of the mice at Loamhedge. So they fled the area because the only way they'd be able to survive was to flee. They make it through places, ? We don't know how far away Loamhedge is.
At least not in this book,
Yeah. And then Abbess Germain, who is the mouse who is in charge of these creatures, she's a healer, she's not a fighter, they're not a group of fighting mice. Some of them step up to help the defenders, but mostly they're there to heal and bring respite and refuge. So Loamhedge is kind of a mysterious place. It's a mysterious myth. We know it happened, but we don't know anything about it. We don't know where it is. We don't know what plague, what happened, all that kind of stuff. So we will find out more about Loamhedge in coming books and months. Actually, one that's coming quite soon.
Yeah, gets mentioned. Yeah.
Anyway, enough about that. And I guess the final big world building place is Brockhall. So I guess another thing. So Cotir was actually where Mossflower or where Redwall is. Salamandastron is further through Mossflower Wood out onto the coast. Yeah. And then Loam Hedge is somewhere. We don't know exactly where. It's not ever said in this book, I believe. And then Brock Hall is a location inside Mossflower Wood. It is the ancient home of the Badgers.
Yeah.
Is how it's described by Bella. She and her husband lived there with their son, and then he disappeared somewhere.
The son.
The son, yes. There was a conflict, I believe, with the people of Katir, with the horde at Katir, and her husband was killed, and her son disappeared, and she's not sure where he is. You find out at the end of the book that, I guess this important thing to talk about Salamandastron is that the mountain calls to a badger.
Yeah. And
often, at least in this case, Boar dies, and then the son, whose name is Sunflash the Mace, gets...
Technically, grandson. To clarify, he's the grandson of Boar because Boar is the father of Bella.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's not always, I guess, genetic succession. No. It is an arbitrary, the mountain has called this random badger, and they're coming to live there. I don't fully understand it, if I'm honest with you, but...
It ties into the spiritualism I mentioned in the first episode of, while this is a fantasy setting, there isn't really magic, but there is fantastical elements. Like, another great example of that with this book is literally sorry, that's a different character for a different book. Boar brings Martin into this special place in Salamandastron that talks about different events that are going to happen that have not happened yet. So there is some, like... visions that occur with some of the Badger lords and ladies that are etched on the walls of the mountain that like speak of the future. So there's like a lot of that kind of spiritualism. You could almost say is magic, but it's never talked in that way, kind of a thing and stuff. So that kind of is, there's a lot of that when Salamandastron is brought into the picture. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not ever, I guess, modern magic. It's a lot more of ancestral spirits that sort of speak to or speak from the past. So like with
it's very reminiscent of like, and I'm not an expert on any of this, but like Druidic magic beliefs, kind of like ancient England, British. The peoples, British stuff. Very it was written by a man from Britain and everything and stuff. So it very much taps into some of that. I feel like that spiritualism and everything, at least from what I know.
Yeah. And a lot of the, I guess it's at least with the Salamandastron and particularly what Boar shows Martin is one of the previous Badger lords or ladies wrote down the prophecies the things that they saw that would happen in the future. Yeah. And so drew pictures, less writing down words. And Boar, in his ancient wisdom as an old Badger man, was able to read them and tell Martin, they even said you would be coming to the mountain, and here it says. So this is one of the interesting world building / discrepancy things, is that this room is mentioned and there's these predictions of what's going to happen. And I think this is also the first time you meet or hear about Lord Brocktree, right? Because Brocktree was Boar's
father or grandfather or something?
Father or grandfather.
Yeah.
Who
also has his own book.
The first, who also, and we'll get to that eventually, but he's not, it's sort of like ancient history part of the story, and but there's certain things that happen that are like locations or rooms or places that are revealed in the books that you never go back to in another book.
Yeah.
And they're just not talked about ever again.
Is that room never talked about again? I felt like it was.
I don't know. This is something we'll have to make a note of and talk about in the future, but I don't remember them ever talking about this prophecy room ever again. But I think and again, we'll make a note, we'll talk about it in the future if we do run into it. But I think it's a super interesting concept because you have this room that, let's say Brian Jacques had a vision for a bunch of books that he's going to be writing about.
Yeah.
Set in this world, that he's got the potential for Martin to have seen all sorts of crazy, like, things about the future, but he would have no idea what he's looking at. Yeah. And honestly, Boar doesn't know what he's looking at either, because there's just some, prophecy about, this creature is going to come to that mountain and whatever. And then Boar's like, I don't know when that's going to happen. Is it going to be me? Is it going to be my successor? I don't know. So super interesting concept and super interesting potential in that, but I can't remember if it's ever visited again. I don't think it is, but
part of me wants to say it was, but again, you've read them more recently than I have. Yeah. So I haven't read all of them. True. I read a lot of them. Yeah. So I don't know. You guys get to be along the journey with us as we rediscover some of the lore of this setting and everything.
And maybe if you have a better memory of these books than I do, if you've read them, you could be like, Kaytlyn, it does happen on this page in this book. Let us know in the comments on YouTube or Spotify. Okay. I don't. Next.
Never mind.
The characters. What?
Yes, characters.
Oh, okay. We're going to switch it up, actually. Second episode, and we're already doing something new. Look at us being crazy. We are going to talk about our favorite characters. One or two. I think both of us agreed that we have one specific character in this book that is top tier for us. Yeah. And then we're going to talk about the antagonists, the villains. Yeah. Because sometimes they're not necessarily evil. Sometimes they're just... Honestly, I probably would have put Colin Vole, even though he's technically a protagonist. I don't know. I probably would have put him as an antagonist because he was annoying and made everybody's life difficult. Yeah. But would you like to start us out talking about favorite characters, Brianna?
Yeah. So it's no secret between me and Kaytlyn that the Badgers are usually the best characters in the book. In my opinion, yes. They're always just so strong and powerful and, like, just usually sometimes. Some of them have, like, those character flaws and stuff, but, like, they're just generally, like, really great characters and stuff. And this book had two of them in it, but specifically I'm going to talk about Bella of Brockhall. And Bella of Brockhall she's kind of she at this point thinks she's the last of the, like, lords and ladies of Brockhall, essentially, because she doesn't know what happened to her son. Her husband died in the conflict. Her dad has been gone for decades. Or seasons, technically, in the case of this. Yeah. And she's lost so much, and she's had to keep it all together and, like, encourage the Woodlanders that she essentially is responsible for, honestly, because the Lords and Ladies of Brockhall, for generations at this point, have been responsible for the Woodlanders of Mossflower. Yeah. And everything. So she has a lot on her shoulders, and she's just a very strong woman character, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate how much she, like, stands fast, and she is there for everybody, and she makes sure everybody's taken care of. She literally opens up Brockhall because the Sarmese people at Katir don't know where Brockhall is. It's, like, hidden in the woods and everything. Essentially, it's like a hollowed out tree. And we mentioned this earlier, but, like, people will find it again once or twice at least in the series because it is abandoned at one point. But Bella's just a very strong character, and I always appreciate motherly characters who are strong and who persevere and fight for people. And then I will mention one of my favorite parts with her, and this is the thing that I really appreciate about a lot of Brian Jacques' women characters, is just because they're a woman does not disqualify the, like, strengths that they have as like she's a badger. She's not a warrior badger, but she's still super strong. She's a badger, because all badgers are strong, no matter if they're a male or female badger. And she, later in the book, and I didn't quite describe this when I was doing the overview, because you only have so much room to do this, but one of my favorite scenes in the book is Martin has fought Sarmina, and she essentially, I think, poisoned him or something, and he's, like, dying, bleeding out, and they're like, we don't know what we're going to do. The only person that can actually, like, save him from death is Abbess Germain, who is off in a different place with all of the non-combatant woodlanders who they're trying to keep away. And Bella's like, all right, I'm going to go get her. And she like runs all night, gets to this hiding place that's miles away, straps Abbess Germain to her back and books it back as fast as she can. And they get back in time to stabilize Martin. And it takes him a while to heal and stuff. But, like, she, like, put herself out there. She pushed herself to the extreme physically to save Martin. And it's just, like, one of my favorite parts in the book, honestly. That this character who is a woman, in the context of, like, the story and everything and stuff, is a woman and still gets to be really cool and, like, physically really cool and stuff. Because you don't get to see that a lot in books and stuff, honestly. Even sometimes books where it's, like, she's a warrior, but, like, very rarely in books do women characters get to be big and beefy and, like... tanks kinda and stuff. And it's not like Bella as a character is a tank for things, but she still has that like, she is a big lady and stuff, and, like, she gets to use that. So that's kind of the thing that I think I really appreciate about the Badgers is, like, they're not physically small at all, and they're always strong for the most part and stuff. Not all of them utilize that strength in the way, like, a warrior would, but it's still like I don't know, it's just something that I always enjoyed about it, and I wish they had more in books. Other books where it's like women are not just small, even if they are physically strong, but they're not just, like, small things and stuff. So that's one of the reasons why I really love Bella, because she is really smart, really strong, really cool. And I think an interesting thing about that is Bella is also older. She's not a young badger. She's not, you know, there's other times we'll have characters who are badgers who are in their younger seasons and are just sort of the prime of their life sort of thing. Like, Bella is her dad is ancient. Bella is, you know, I would say, like, upper middle age. I would say she's, like, probably in her early 50s is what I would say. Because if he's ancient, like, I want to say within the context of humans, like, in his 80s or something and stuff. So she's, and like,
he's still 50s, kicking 60s. Around too.
And he's still, like,
there's definitely What?
Oh, I was just gonna say, he also kicked the butt of that rat and everything. He went down doing it, but he still did it and stuff. So, like, badgers don't want to mess with them at any age.
No, not at all. Not even as babies.
No.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun.
And my favorite character is, to probably nobody's surprise, certainly not Brianna's, is Gonf. Because he is, and I think I'm noticing a pattern, and I really hope this pattern breaks by the next book, but I don't know that it will. He's fun, he's lighthearted. I mean, he's experiencing the tyranny and the oppression of Starmina and her father. He's experienced the weight of all of that, but he's kept up his positivity and his hopefulness in him, and he's continued singing, just making up little ditties, and he is, I love it because he's very much a Robin Hood type character where he's stealing from Katir and he's bringing it back. He has found adopted family with some of the hedgehogs
because he's an orphan.
But I love it because I love we talk about this a lot, family, where this isn't your genetic family or your born in family. These are the people that you found in life, whether you're young or older, and have said, I love these people and they're mine. They're my people, they're my family, and they mean as much to me as if they were blood related to me. And I love that Gonf is very much like that, and he's not just, you know, picky with one group of people, but he finds Martin in prison when they're both imprisoned, and Gonf is like, psh, they can't keep me here forever. I'll break out at some point. And Martin has had just a devastating life, which we'll learn more about in one of the future books you read. And then he's lost his father's sword. He is alone. He's broken. He's in a new place that he doesn't know anybody.
Yeah.
And here comes this mouse that he's becomes just such good friends with. They're like brothers, basically.
Yeah.
And it is a deep friendship. It is a true friendship. Gonf is like, of course I'm going to go with you to the mountain. Of course I'm going to do these things with you.
Yeah.
And I think he's the type of character that I wish I was more like. And people are always like, oh, Kaytlyn, you're so positive. And I'm like, y'all are not in my brain. You don't understand what's going on up in this dome.
Yeah.
But the fact that through facing some severe hardship and danger and uncertainty, Gonf says, I will hold on to hope. I will hold on to positivity. I will hold on to light. And I'm going to continue walking in that. I think is really powerful. And obviously in our modern day and age, we love a grim, dark story. I mean, I guess humans have always kind of loved that. You've got the grim fairy tales, which are super old but super dark.
There's always a place for that, and that's why there still is those kinds of stories.
But even in like what if I'm thinking of things that have become really popular recently, a lot of them are super dark. The things that have become massively popular, things like Game of Thrones and I don't know, other things, which
and
are
that is
just,
the big one, honestly.
It kind of is, and it's a lot of people are talking about it, and I was just listening to some narrative on it recently. It is dark, it is violent, it is not hopeful, and it doesn't end hopeful. And there is a place to explore these feelings of hopelessness and like uncertainty and the darkness of the world and how terrible it can get. But I think I think why I love Gonf is because even though he is experiencing these really dark things, and Martin, his new best friend, has some hardships, I love that Gonf is like, in spite of all of what's going on, I'm going to stay hopeful. Yeah. And I think we need more characters like Gonf who say, I know things are really bad, and, I'm still going to work to change them, but I'm also going to stay hopeful that there's good coming.
I actually was thinking about why you're talking about that, and it's funny, and this isn't across the board with everything, but it's funny about how a lot of quote-unquote adult media is dark. And I'm not saying, again, it's across the board, but a lot of adult media leans really into the struggles of life, the hopelessness of life, the darkness of life and everything. And it doesn't often show the goodness and the kindness and the hope of it and everything. And I'm not saying, like, we shouldn't have stories that show the struggle of whatever aspect of life people are in and things like that. But especially in, like, fantasy, sci-fi media lately, that's mostly what all of that's been focused on. And it's a little bit sad because it's like, why as adults do we have to have all of the media be so dark and, like, just not hopeful? And again, like, there's some, like, really popular media that, like, yes, there's interesting stories and, like, interesting lore, and is darker, and I'm not, like, trying to say we shouldn't have that or anything. It just would be really nice if there was more, like, fantasy, sci-fi, that kind of stuff, like, more like these epic stories that we have that are less, like, the world is terrible and more about, like, the adventure and the hope of it and stuff. Yeah. And I know there are stuff, it's just not as pushed as the darker things in adult media specifically. You can find that stuff in, like, cartoons and stuff, but, like, not, like, in adult media.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting, I guess, sociological phenomenon. Yeah. Not to use big words right after one another, but I think it's one of the reasons I love Gonf, and it's one of the reasons I love reading kids' books. It's one of the reasons I love media that is geared towards middle grade. It's one of the reasons that I love watching Bluey. I'm just saying, okay? I'm a big fan. I wish Bluey had come out 10 years ago, or more than 10 years ago, because you can bet your booty that I'd be talking about Bluey on here. However, we've given ourselves a limit of things we watch and engage with as children. So, alas, Kaytlyn will have to talk about Bluey to just the people she knows. Yes. Anyway, if you guys have like what are some books, and actually this would be a good question maybe we can put online, is what are some books that are meant for adults, that are geared towards adults, that do actually maybe deal a little bit with dark themes, but there's a hope and there's a lightness and there's a I guess a hopefulness, and it ends hopeful. Love to hear some of your recommendations.
Absolutely.
Hopefully some of them are newer books and I can read them.
Yeah.
Because again, we're not talking about it, but Brandon Sanderson, I think, does a good job of this. Anyway, moving on. Don't drop the name drops. So, the other thing we want to talk about with characters was antagonists. Because there's two main antagonists here. We have Sarmina, the wildcat. Yeah. She is the daughter of Verdaga Green Eyes, who is the lord of the castle. But then Originally, she and one of her captains, Fortunata, a fox also, poison Verdaga, and he dies, and Sarmina becomes queen. She has a brother who is a pacifist, essentially, and doesn't want to be violent, and unfortunately she locks him in prison, and then leaves him to rot and forgets about him. She basically pretends he doesn't exist and makes all of her creatures also pretend that he doesn't exist. Now, he ends up becoming a really, really helpful and a key character in certain points. He protects some of the little woodland creatures that get caught. Because he's not allowed to exist, technically. The people aren't allowed to acknowledge that he's even there. And so when he protects them and hides them in his cell, they're like, well, we can't search the cell because he technically doesn't exist. And then the Woodlanders free him. He ends up going far away, finding another lady, wildcat, that he falls in love with. And then they have little wildcat babies. And guess what? Squire Julian, whatever his name was. Squire Julian from Redwall, the last book. There was a cat and an owl who were friends. He is a descendant of Gingerveer, who is Sarmina's brother.
And then
just
what is
things
that?
I had to say.
Okay. I was like, wait, what are we talking about?
I think it is an important thing to notice that there is the tie-in, but it is a tie-in between Mossflower and Redwall that actually Sir Julian, Squire Julian was a descendant of the wildcats of this area. That actually, there's connection there. I thought it was important. Anyway, Sarmina is psycho. She is evil through and through. She is also deeply afraid of water for reasons that we don't truly understand. But it is a character trait. It is, as Brianna said earlier, her kryptonite. Yeah. And she's just a whole bunch of things. She's cruel. She's not like a good commander. She's a cruel commander. Yeah. And so she's kind of like the main antagonist, the main bad guy. But then she hires some mercenaries, one of which is a fox named Bane. Now, Bane, other than knowing that he's a fox and a mercenary, we have no backstory for him. There's not.
He's from up north or something, I think it says. Yeah.
And his band of mercenaries are from up north. But they all respect him and they all follow him willingly. Because he's a good fighter, he's a good leader, he's smart, he's clever. He's cruel to a degree, but not as cruel as Sarmina. And then they kind of team up to try and get rid of the Woodlanders, basically. So, we're talking about Bane versus Sarmina. Yes. Because I said something to Brianna before we started recording that was, I think if Bane had actually been put in charge, I don't know that the Woodlanders would have actually won. Or would have at least taken them a lot longer to win. Yeah.
Essentially, the problem I think with Sarmina is it was like nepotism that got her in the end, and also her being crazy, because she was very much of like, everything is mine. I've been a spoiled child since I was little because my dad was the one in charge, and it fed into this thing where she honestly did not actually know what she was doing 90% of the time with leading. She just told people what to do and expected them to do it, even if it made no actual like logical good sense. And then the whole water thing was getting to her because everything else was failing around her. But then with Bane, he didn't have some of the holdups. He was the one that like built from the ground up kind of a thing, his little mercenary group and stuff. And he did all of the work and stuff and was willing to put in more work and grease people's paws, do what he needed to do essentially to get people to be on his side. But Zarmina was like, I'm in charge. I get to do whatever I want. You have to listen to me. So it's two very different ways of leading, even within the context of them both being antagonists and stuff. It was very interesting.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing, I guess, in terms of leadership, especially of bad guys, that often the bad guys in charge tends to be a little bit crazy. So Clooney from last episode from Redwall, he was a good leader, but he was vicious and he was cruel, and he started to go a little bit crazy, and he was haunted by Martin in his dreams, and there's all sorts of things, but he ended up being consumed by his craziness, basically. So it was just an interesting, I guess, comparison between two bad guys, and unfortunately Bane ends up dying sometime in the end.
It's not even in the end. She tricks him into being... Not? No, because remember... So, giving you guys a little bit of context, one of the things that goes on in the background is there's this eagle that really wants to eat this specific character, a pine marten. And the pine marten has this, like, specific outfit that he wears, or cape or whatever. And he dies at some point. I forget how. I don't even know if it was the eagle that killed the pine marten and stuff. But... wasn't. No, so at some point, to trick Bane and to get him out of the way, because Zarmina again was going crazy and stuff, and she gives him this cloak, and he's like, I have the cloak, thanks, like, I got more power kind of a thing, and he's kind of waltzing through through the courtyard of the castle. The eagle sees him, and then kills him and stuff and eats him and everything.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, so the only reason why he didn't survive is because he didn't have the context of what was going on as she tricked him. Because that was the thing, like, it's not that Zarmina isn't smart or anything like that, because she is, but she let her, like... She let her craziness, or, like, her, like, spiraling out of control and everything, and also the fact that she, again, it was the nepotism and stuff, like, she's like, this is all mine, I have inherited it, and, like, this arrogance, that's what it is. This arrogance and her spiraling out of control, like, get rid of all of the smart things she could have done during the whole context of the thing, so, yeah.
You're right. I forgot about that.
That's the reason why it's fun to discuss both together, because, like, there are parts you're going to remember, there's parts that I'm going to remember, so yeah. So that's how Bane died, and like we were talking about, if he'd survived and actually, like, had more control of the situation, it may have been even less likely for the Mossflower Woodlanders to survive this whole thing.
Yeah. Man. Poor Bane, but also he's evil, so.
Yes,
Hooray that he's gone.
Hooray.
Anyway, Brianna, it's time now for our nostalgia rating.
Yes, okay.
You go first.
Okay. So, I'm going to give this a 4. I honestly liked it a lot better than Redwall, and I could see myself rereading this one more frequently than Redwall, because it was a very simple, almost hero's journey kind of a thing, but there's obviously, like, nuances to it and stuff, and there was, like, more exploration, I think, was part of it, because when we were in Redwall, it was literally Redwall and a little bit of the surrounding Mossflower Woods, and that's it. That's all that we really dealt with. And in this one, there was actually a journey that they had to go on, and they met a lot of different people, interesting people. They were able to bring back an army. They also, the first time, Salmon Dashron's always been one of my favorite places that they go, because it's just really cool and everything. And so getting to see that glimpse of a place that I always, like, it's always in the back of my brain when I think of the Redwall books, like, that will put this at a higher level for me than Redwall with it. So that's my rating.
That makes sense. Yeah, mine's 3.5 because, again, it was better than Redwall. It is something, I agree with you, it is something I'd reread more often. It feels a little bit more epic than Redwall did, and not in a negative way. I just feel bad about giving things bad stars. I don't know why, but
look, I'm a chronic 5-star, so
I know.
Yeah,
I know. I'm a chronic 3-star, honestly, because 5 stars have to be insanely good for me. Yeah, or I have to have too much of an emotional attachment to them that's unhealthy and probably like, I don't know, a little bit
Yeah.
crazy. But I think it's a good story. It's better than Redwall was. Already his second book that he's writing in this series, you can see the improvement of world building. You can see the improvement of less discrepancies than the first book.
Yeah.
There's no horses.
Yeah.
There's no pigs or whatever in here. There's no Portugal represented. Sorry, Portugal. But, you know. Yeah. And I think also it is Martin the Warrior. And it's the first glimpse we get of Martin the Warrior. Although it's definitely not the last. Yeah. And I think it's just really, really good backstory for my personal tastes. Yeah. So, yeah. It's nostalgic because we read it when we were kids. It's Martin the Warrior and one of his backstories. And then there's some other, I guess, backstory of Redwall and Lomehedge and Salamandastron. It's the first glimpse of a lot of these things that we will thankfully get to explore a bit more.
Yeah. Any
other thoughts on Mossflower, Brianna?
Not today, no.
Not today. We'll find out. Tomorrow, Brianna's going to call me and be like, hey, actually another thought.
I mean, knowing us, that would be a thing that would happen.
It's true. It's definitely something that's happened before. Let's be real.
Yes.
Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Readers Clubhouse. If you like this discussion and you want to hear more, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify every other Friday. You can subscribe to our Spotify and YouTube channels. You can like and comment. You can do all those things. Check the episode descriptions for our social media. And join us in the Clubhouse next time as we discuss the next book, not chronologically or publication order, but just the next one we're going to read.
Yeah.
Martin the Warrior.
Yeah.
The true backstory of one of the most consistent characters in this entire series.
Yeah.
So join us next time in a couple of weeks. Yeah, but other than that, we will see you guys later.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Bye.